Okay, now I wanted to post an update on this tomato. It is tomato that has been grown from a seed that was dropped while we were planting last spring, and it started as a much smaller plant, obviously under the table, and growing up through the table that never produced during the summer. So through June, July, August, it was here in the greenhouse. It was too hot, and even though it would get yellow blossoms, it wouldn't produce any fruit. Well, as soon as September rolled around, we thought about pulling it out of the greenhouse, and we didn't. We decided to just let it go. It looked actually fairly healthy and green, even though it hadn't made any fruit. And what happened is September, October, November, December, and now January, it has been producing fruit. Now, the greenhouse is fairly warm. Sun's coming in here. It's probably close to about 80 right now. And the plant is spread out along the black plastic on the floor. Now, any parts of the plant that have gone into the air, there were some parts that were growing up through the table. Those died as it got colder, and you can see even some of these that are have been growing. Looks like they've gotten some kind of damage, and they've died. But there's still pretty healthy dark green growth all along the floor, and there's along different parts of the plant lots of yellow blossoms even now. This is January 10th, so at this point this plant is probably about 9.5, 10 months old. Still covered with fruit. Some of the biggest, healthiest tomatoes I think I've ever grown, and just really keeps doing a good job. So we're going to save some seed from this guy and hope that we can grow some other plants that can follow in its footsteps, so to speak, and keep growing through the year. And this guy, like I said, he's got some growth that has died in the cold, but there's also lots of other growth, like over there and here, that managed to stay alive through some pretty cold evenings here in December and January. So even though we got down to pretty low temperatures at night and no sun coming through, the greenhouse got fairly cold. It didn't frost, and it stayed. It kept the fruits on. So we've eaten quite a few of them. They taste pretty good. We've had some green and some ripened, and they've been good tomatoes. Now the jugs are just should be more plentiful. What we should have is a lot more jugs around it to hold on to heat and keep it warm at night. But we just found that somehow it was managing without them. It probably doesn't even need those jugs, because all of the growth along the floor that's set out on this black plastic is growing really nicely. And the root system on this thing, when we do eventually pull it out, I'm assuming that it has a fairly deep root system, because it's when it fell as a seed, it fell on a seam in the greenhouse floor and sent its roots down underneath the greenhouse plastic. So it hasn't been watered. When it rains, it gets a little bit, and when water condenses and then falls in the morning, it gets a little bit. But for the most part, I'm thinking it's getting its water from a root system underneath the floor. So we didn't take care of this. We didn't water it. It managed to be watered by, putting its own roots down under the greenhouse floor, and by occasionally getting some rain that would come across the floor from outside and give it some moisture. Now I'm going to move one more part of the plant. Let's see, I don't want to move it too much because, you know, moving it around, you can get breakage or some of the fruit can fall off. But there's, you know, tomatoes kind of at every stage. Oh, try not to run into the spider there. The spiders are happy in the greenhouse too. See, we've got tomatoes that are turning color, and then we've got some small tomatoes coming in. So lots and lots. We've picked quite a few. I think we picked 4 or 6 this week, and they're pretty good size. Just to show you the size, see, they're not quite a baseball, and they definitely need washed when we pick them because just of soil. Even though we've swept the floor, a lot of soil still collected under the plant, and I've been nervous about moving the plant too much. The one time we did make some shuffle it around a little bit and try to condense it into a smaller area of the greenhouse, we had 4 or 5 tomatoes get knocked off, so I haven't messed with it too much since. But there you have it. It's January 10th. This plant is from a seed that fell likely during our March planting that grew up under the greenhouse tables. You can see the tables there where we work. Grew under the tables, grew up through the tables, and then after producing nothing all summer, really perked up in September. And yeah, it's getting warm in here now. This greenhouse is nice and warm, and it's getting pretty warm, and it's doing very well. And that's it. Again, we'll be saving seed and seeing if we can get some plants grown that will survive the greenhouse next year, although we'll try to put them in a pot rather than having them just take over the floor.